Welcome to the Best of CET series by IMS. Today we'll be solving some syllogism-based questions. This is a form of traditional logic which has been retained by many management aptitude tests, including the CET. How do we solve such questions? Well, you need to be good at drawing Venn diagrams. So, for all of these questions today, make sure that you have some pen and paper so that you can draw and figure out the solution. Make sure that you pause the video and solve it on your own before you look at the solution. Let's get started.
If you like our content and want to experience the IMS pedagogy, you can join the IMS Zero Fee Prep programs that will give you access to concept videos, sectionals, full-length tests and more for free. You may click on the I button or on the link in the description box below to access the same. Happy learning!
If you look at the instructions, and it is very important that you do look at the instructions, it says that in these questions, you will be given 4 statements followed by 2 conclusions. You have to decide on the basis of these 4 statements, which of these conclusions can be derived. And you have to choose from among 5 options. 1, if only the first conclusion follows. 2, if only the second conclusion follows. What about 3? What does either conclusion 1 or 2 follows really mean? What this means is that we cannot be certain of either conclusion, but one of them must be true. Both cannot be true at the same time and both cannot be false at the same time. This is a fairly tricky scenario to encounter. So, we will get into more detail when we encounter something like that. When we say both conclusions follow, it's very simple. Based on the 4 statements given, both the conclusions can be derived with certainty. And the last one simply means that despite all the data, neither of the conclusions can be derived with any degree of certainty. So, let's look at our first question now. As you can see, there are 4 statements. Some cherries are sour, all mangoes are green, some mangoes are sour, and no cherries are green. You can try to do it without writing things down, but I find it's always helpful to draw the Venn diagram. So let's get started with that. I hope you managed your diagram. Let's now take a look at what I would have drawn. The first statement here, some cherries are sour. Fairly easy to figure this one out. It means that there is at least one cherry which is sour and at least one sour thing which is a cherry. So there is an intersection between these 2 categories. All mangoes are green. Again, fairly easy to figure this one out. The entire category of mangoes is contained within the category green. But then we are saying some mangoes are sour. Now, what happens? All that really means is that the category mangoes is overlapping with the category sour. The last statement here, no cherries are green. We don't really need to draw anything. All that you really need to understand is that the category of cherries cannot overlap with the category green. Let's evaluate our first conclusion now. Some sour are green. Is that true? Well, yes. We can see that the circle sour is clearly intersecting with the circle green. This is the area that we are referring to when we say some sour are green. So, my first conclusion is definitely valid. The second one here, some cherries are mangoes. Well, that's a little unlikely because it clearly says that no cherries are green. In other words, the category cherry has no overlap with the category green. Mangoes are contained within the category green, which means that there can be no overlap between mangoes and cherries either. So there is no way that some cherries are mangoes. Fairly easy to figure this one out. The first conclusion follows, but the second one does not. Let's take a look at our options. Over here, we should definitely choose option 1 because only the first conclusion follows, but not the second one. Let's take a look at the next question. This one is a fairly easy one. Take a look at it and see if you can draw the diagram on your own. If you don't want to draw the Venn diagram, you can try to do it in your head as well. But as I said earlier, I would not advise it until you reach an expert level. Let's take a look at the solution now. All farms are tillers. How would we draw it? Fairly easy. All farms are tillers. Some farmers are tillers. You need to be careful with this one. Farms is a separate category and farmers is a separate category. So, we would draw it something like this. All farmers are villagers. So now we have another category coming in. Some farms are farmers. So now the category farms will intersect with the category farmers. And we have our Venn diagram. Let's take a look at our first conclusion. All farms are villagers. We can see that some farms are villagers, but we can't be sure that all of them are. So we know that conclusion 1 does not follow. The second one says some farmers are not villagers. Again, we can clearly see that all farmers are villagers. So conclusion 2 also does not follow. It's a fairly simple question. Let's take a look at our options. Here we would definitely mark 5. No conclusion follows. There are no other two ways about it. Let's take a look at the next question. This one is a little tricky. Take your time to think about it. Also think about multiple ways in which you can draw the same statements. If you were confused while drawing this one, I completely understand because here there are 2 different possibilities. Let's get started. All injuries are fatal. This part is simple. All fatal are brutal. Also not too difficult. Some fatal are instant. This is where multiple possibilities might strike you. All instant are brutal. This we do not really need to draw because we already have the circle instant within the circle brutal. Now, what other way could I have drawn it? Let's look at that. Again, we start off exactly the same way. All injuries are fatal. All fatal are brutal. No change here. The change will come into play now. Some fatal are instant. I can draw instant overlapping with injuries also. Why are we even considering so many possibilities? There is a reason. Let's look at our conclusions. What you should notice is that the categories are the same in both the conclusions. Injuries and instant, instant and injury. You should also see that the 2 conclusions are mutually exclusive. They cannot both be true at the same time. Whenever you see a situation like this, you should consider the possibility that though both cannot be true, one of them might just be true. Let's look at our diagram here. There are only 2 possibilities. Instant and injuries intersect or do not intersect. But one of these possibilities has to be true. What does that mean? What is the option that we select? Let's evaluate. If I draw it this way, I will get conclusion 1. If I draw it this way, I get conclusion 2. Both of them might possibly be true, but I can be absolutely certain that one of them is definitely true. I just don't know which one. When we look at our options, can we say only conclusion 1 follows? No, because it does not follow definitively. We can't be certain about it. Same goes for conclusion 2. We cannot be sure. So, option 1 and 2 are eliminated. Option 3 says either conclusion 1 or 2 follows. What this means is neither definitely follows, but one of them must be true, which is exactly the situation that we have here. Both conclusions follow? Definitely not, because both of them cannot be true at the same time. So option 4 is eliminated. No conclusion follows. We would have normally picked this, except that in this case, we know that one of them will have to be true. So our answer here must be either 1 or 2 follows. In case you're confused about how this question was worked out, maybe review this video one more time and you will understand. Let's take a look at the next question, which hopefully will be a little simpler. Now here we're saying all birds are dragons. Again, when you read these statements, please understand that they may not describe the real world. You simply have to take the data presented to you in the question as true. Do not question the data. So when it says all birds are dragons, that is exactly what you have to work with. Take your time, see if you can draw the diagram, and then evaluate which of these conclusions will follow. Let's take a look at the solution now. All birds are dragons is fairly easy to figure out. Some pigeons are not dragons. You have to be a little careful about drawing this one. Some pigeons are not dragons actually refers to the part that is outside the circle of dragons. Then we have some crows are birds. Now here again there are two possibilities. We will put both of them in the same diagram this time. Some crows are birds. Another possibility is that the entire category of crows is within the circle of dragons. Now we don't know which one is the correct way to draw it. The last one says, no crows are pigeons. We don't need to draw any further circles. No crows are pigeons simply means that the circle of crows cannot overlap with the circle pigeons. Let's take a look at our conclusions now. Some dragons are crows. Some dragons will have to be crows, as you can see, regardless of how we draw crows, whether this way or this way, there will have to be at least one dragon that is also a crow. So our first conclusion will definitely follow. The second one, some birds are not pigeons. Which birds are we talking about? I'm not really going to look at this circle and compare it to this circle. The way that you should think about it is, the birds that are crows are definitely not pigeons. The birds that are crows are definitely not pigeons. How do I know that? Some birds are crows, we know that for sure. We also know that no crows are pigeons. So it will have to be true that some birds are not pigeons. Again, this is regardless of how I create this Venn diagram. So I know what answer to mark now. If you take a look at the options, we can see that both the conclusions will be true and both can be true at the same time. We are fairly certain. So our answer is going to be 4. Let's take a look at the next question now. This is the last question. Give this your best shot. Take your time. So how would we draw this one? All shirts are tops. This is fairly easy. Some tops are silks. So we have this. Some silks are premiers. Now it's really okay if you don't know what premiers are. All you need to do is to draw the diagram. And then we have no shirts are silks. We don't need to draw anything additional. All we need to understand is that this circle of shirts cannot overlap or intersect with this circle of silks. Our conclusion says, some premiers are not silks. Now, a lot of us would think that seems to be true. Some premiers, which are outside the circle of silks, are not silks. But there is a rule that you need to keep in mind. When there is a statement that tells you some x is y, it does not automatically mean some x is not y. Why does it not mean that? Because there is another possibility. It is possible that silks and premiers are exactly the same category. So when we say some silks are premiers, we really do not know how much overlap there is. We know that there is at least one silk which is a premier, but it could be all of them. In other words, they are the same category. Since this possibility exists, and since we know that the rule says that some x is y does not mean some x is not y, we will have to say that conclusion 1 does not follow. Let's take a look at the second conclusion now. Some tops are not shirts. How do we know that? Some of you might say, oh, there are some tops which are not shirts because they seem to be outside the circle. But that's not how you're supposed to look at it. We know that all of shirts are tops, no problem there. We also know that no shirts are silks. How we are supposed to understand this is that the tops that are shirts are not silks. The tops that are shirts are not silks. Therefore, conclusion 2 follows. What is our answer going to be? It's fairly easy. Conclusion 2 follows, conclusion 1 does not follow. So we will mark 2 as our answer. And that is all for today, folks. Hope you learned something from this. Syllogs are one question type where practice can lead to perfection. So go ahead and give it your best.